What if the life you're living right now is only one of countless versions available to you? And what if changing your reality has less to do with forcing things to happen and more to do with changing the way you move through the world? That's the basic idea behind Reality Transurfing, a system developed by Russian author Vadim Zeland. His work became popular because it offers a very different way of thinking about goals, desire, and the reality we experience. Zeland describes reality as a kind of space of variations, an infinite field containing countless possible versions of events. Think of it like this. At any moment, there are many different directions your life could take. One decision leads here, another leads somewhere completely different, and over time, those small shifts can create completely different versions of your life. But according to Zeland, most people make one major mistake when they want something. They make it too important. Imagine you desperately want a certain job, or a relationship, or more money. You start thinking, I have to get this. I need this to work. If this doesn't happen, everything is ruined, and suddenly the thing you want carries enormous emotional weight. Zeland calls this excess importance. And in his framework, excessive importance creates what he calls excess potential. The more desperately you cling to an outcome, the more tension you create around it. And Zeland argues that what he calls balancing forces arise to neutralize that imbalance. Now, whether you take that literally or simply as a psychological metaphor, there's an interesting observation here. When something becomes desperately important to us, we often behave differently. We overthink, we become anxious, we try to control everything, we notice every sign that something might be going wrong, and sometimes our own desperation makes the situation harder. Think about waiting for someone to text you. When you don't care very much, you put your phone down and continue your day. But when you desperately need that message, suddenly you're checking your phone every 3 minutes. You're analyzing what you said. You're wondering what they're thinking. You're creating an entire reality in your mind around one outcome. Reality Transurfing says the answer isn't to stop wanting things. It's to stop placing your happiness entirely on whether you get them. You can still have a goal. You can still move toward it, but instead of saying, I need this to happen, the attitude becomes, this is what I choose, and I'm moving in that direction. That distinction is important in Zeland's system. He separates desire from intention. Desire is wanting something. Intention is being prepared to act and move toward it. And this is where transurfing becomes more interesting than simply sitting around imagining the life you want. You're still supposed to move. You still make decisions. You still take action, but you try to do it without turning every obstacle into a catastrophe. Another major idea in reality transurfing is something Zeland calls pendulums. A pendulum is essentially a collective structure that gains energy from people's attention and emotional involvement. It could be a political argument, a workplace conflict, an online controversy, a social group, even a trend everyone suddenly becomes obsessed with. The more people emotionally react to it, the more powerful it becomes. And Zeland's advice isn't necessarily to fight the pendulum, because fighting it can still mean giving it your attention. Instead, you become aware of what is pulling at you. You decide what deserves your energy and what doesn't. That might be one of the most practical ideas in the entire system, because whether or not you believe Zeland's larger metaphysical claims, your attention really is limited. Whatever constantly receives your attention begins occupying more and more of your mental world. And that brings us to another transurfing idea: choosing the direction you want your life to move in. Instead of constantly fighting the reality you don't want, you begin orienting yourself toward the one you do, not by pretending problems don't exist, and not by believing that thinking about something magically guarantees it will happen, but by becoming much more conscious of where you're placing your attention, what you're making important, and what actions you're repeatedly taking. You choose a direction. You reduce the desperate attachment to the outcome, and then you keep moving. That's the strange paradox at the center of reality transurfing. You can deeply want something without making your entire happiness depend on getting it. You can pursue something without constantly chasing it. And you can care about your future without trying to control every single step that gets you there. Maybe that's why Zeland's work has stayed interesting to people for so long. Underneath all of the unusual terminology, variations, balancing forces, pendulums, and tension, there is a surprisingly simple question. How much of your life are you consciously choosing, and how much of it are you simply reacting to? Because perhaps changing direction doesn't always begin with doing more. Sometimes it begins with deciding what no longer deserves your energy. And if that made you think, stay curious. There's always more beyond thought.